So, how do you recognize the physicality, first and foremost? How would you bring it to mind?
As necessary basis for all.
But that can also be an abstract idea. Like sometimes that might lead you to it. But if you just tell a random person, think about the necessary basis, you can imagine they will probably go in all sorts of ideas in secondary directions. So that means that's like a secondary description of the physicality. So what is the physicality itself?
I would say sixth sense base, but from it's like more from for example the touch, but not particular touch, but the whole domain of touch. Touch itself.
Is it only touch?
Yeah, six senses, including the thoughts.
So, but is there anything specific about it that you can say, this is what the physicality is? That you can always just kind of repeatedly find it by attending to that.
In theory, I can attend to it because it's already there.
But is there anything specific, like any specific characteristic of the physicality that you can just use to bring your mind to it every time? Like if I just want to remember something very specific, and I just think about red, and it can remind me of roses. So is there anything like that you can have with physicality, that you can just directly find it every time you try to do so? Anybody else also has any?
Maybe approach from sensations, present of sensations overall.
But like, what if you start attending to the sensations as a specific thing, which is as you said, another image? Because I mean that's what most people's practice revolves around, and they're certainly not developing recognition of physicality.
By trying not to attend to particular sensuary experience, but maintaining this peripheral awareness of it.
Yeah, so actually that it was a trick question. Like there isn't anything specific that you can attend to, because it's anything that you can kind of hold on to in that direct sense is going to be a sense object. It's not going to be a physicality. So that's why the Buddha said it's like a hollow village that gets attacked by bandits. He compared it, so that's basically the body. But the problem is, when you describe it in theory, it sounds like it's obvious, but practically speaking, when you try to do it, you will be confusing sense objects with physicality. So like you said, on necessary basis or sensations, or the thing is, these are all things that can kind of indicate where it is, but none of them, like on certain occasions, but none of them are it. So then if you start associating any of them as this is what physicality is, you fall into the trap of confusing a sense object for that because of which the sense object is there.
So you said that it was a trick question with no answer. So could the answer also be that anything could serve that purpose if you know where to look?
Well, not anything, because like if you just stare at random sites or something,
Right.
and you kind of keep going that direction, it's never.
I guess not.
What can
if you're not looking for it in the thing. So
what can serve to reveal that direction indirectly is the utterance of another, the right instruction. But it's important to keep in mind that these are two completely separate domains. Like, there is no direct connection between your thinking about what the physicality is, even if it's right based on what somebody told you, and the actual physicality that's there here and now. So you can potentially, like, it can lead you to see it, but it's never going to be a kind of direct relationship, like a thing in the world that if I just tell you look there and you look there and that's it, I saw it. It's more like, well, let's say how so let's put it this way. It would be like, would there be any sight that I can tell you to look at that would that would reveal your nose within your field of vision? The answer is obviously no, because you can spend 1,000 years looking at that sight. Like, it's a completely different domain.
Yeah, so the six senses, they don't mix, is what you mean.
Well, the sense organs don't mix with the sense objects. Like what the Buddha said, with the you will never be able to access the eye through the eye.
Mm-hmm.
You will never be able to access the ear through the ear. So this is the whole topic of this hollow, empty.
Yes, but with your eye, you can also not access the sense base of smelling things.
Yeah, of course, exactly. Yeah, that's another external sight. It's
Yes.
not the actual faculty.
Yeah. Okay, but that's not what you meant.
No. I just
meant.
meant in the general sense, the thought of the thing is not going to be the thing. But again, it's not a mystification of like the non-conceptual actual thing that exists below the appearance. It's a practical training of not misconceiving. Again, you're not denying the fact that when you think about whatever, when you think about your posture in this room, you're not denying that that's a thought about the body. You're not saying like, oh, I shouldn't be thinking this. But you are restraining yourself from confusing that thought to be the quote-unquote actual body that's there. Because you see, there is that level which, even if your thoughts, like regardless of whether your thoughts are thinking about it or whether they have drifted into like thinking about, I don't know, Neptune and the galaxy on the other side of the universe, that thing is still there and it can never go anywhere.
And by that thing,
and that's what I mean, that it's in two completely different domains.
But that thing is that internal physicality that he started out asking to begin with in this case.
Basically that is the body that you have to be mindful of, not the thoughts about the body that you kind of just pick up on that easy foreground level. They will be there, but the whole point is to have a recognition of simultaneity of one with the other, so that basically anything that you could have regarded to be yourself or you could have regarded to be in your control is going to be seen as coming second.
And okay, that's a conclusion now, but why is that so? Like, if you have these two independent directions, then you just said that automatically means sense of self comes second. But why is that so? Can you can we make that explicit? Like, why does dependent origination and assumption of self not go together? Because that's the whole aim. Otherwise, it could become a philosophical exercise in clarifying what is now in internal body. But there's a practical aim here, namely to pull the work out from under the sense of self, which is already, I assume, recognized as suffering, right? So seeing dependent origination is practically useful because it uproots assumption of self.
Yeah, and even if you don't call it dependent origination, because then people might then resort to their secondary ideas about it, whereas it's more about presently developing that principle. But yeah, so why would this uproot the sense of self?
I guess one way of putting it would be, but if there's two, there cannot be one. So if you see the thought of the body there and the body there, then there is no room anywhere apart from those two for you to be first.
Yeah. And also, where do you find your intentions?
What do you
Like, if there's those two domains, so the body underneath everything else that you cannot directly attend to, and then there's your attention, where is your
intention?
Yeah, where is your intention? Which of the two contains your intention? When you intend, do you intend from the internal body, from the physicality?
No, neither.
Neither.
Well, neither from one to the other, neither from the other to the one.
Right, no, of course, but like, independent of like direction, where is, which domain do you find your intentions, your actions, your
Yeah, on the level of thought.
Yeah, exactly. So anything that would be like, I mean, as the Buddha said, you wanted to recognize all activities, all intentions, you could say, are impermanent. And that's exactly how you will do it, because it you don't deny the fact that you can do things, go here, go there, think about this, think about that. And if you were to try to look at impermanence through your thinking, that's going to be another activity that you regard as permanent. So it has to be undermined by seeing as accurate as this thinking about whatever it might be, even if it's in line with the Dhamma, this is undermined by this. Just because it's there. You don't even, like, there any explanation of, like, why does it undermine it, that's second to the fact that it's already there.
So intentions, you are saying, are undermined by that internal physicality being already there.
Yeah, because it's completely doesn't know about your intentions. The problem is that because you overemphasize your intentions, even when they're the good intentions, quote unquote, then you forget that it's there. Like, you obscure, because this is like a two-course movement for this thing that's already there to be remained, so that to be recognized. So that's why maybe now that it's the time to mention it, you can't just from the beginning just take a random person and tell them to start recognizing their internal physicality, because their intentions, the kind of movement of their intentions needs to have subsided to a certain degree. Not that they don't do anything and they just sit still for the whole day, but that certain coarseness of certain intentions is not there. It is not there anymore. So that, you know, it may not be completely calm and still, but there is room now to recognize this more subtle presence of this thing that you were obscuring through your own actions of sensuality, aversion, breaking the precepts, delight in company, and all these things. Because all of this, even though theoretically you can say the internal body never leaves you, even if you go around killing everyone and doing whatever you want, it never leaves you. doing those things intrinsically means that you won't be able to recognize it. So it's like it's gonna remain not seen, even though it's already there. So that's why it's wrong to say that it's impossible not to be mindful of it or something, because you are not mindful of it. That's the default state. But that's a different thing from saying that just because you're not mindful of it, it's not there. That would be wrong, because it is there, even though you're not mindful of it. So it's about balancing the two, not falling into the dimension into the view that it exists only when you attend to it, but also not going to the other extreme and pretending like, okay, so it's just there. I just
can do whatever I want regardless.
Yeah, exactly. So, going back to the original question, if you need to look for a practical thing that will reveal it, probably the first thing you would have to see is not, again, try to define the physicality in like the right terms, because you're just gonna, again, descend into abstract ideas, even though those ideas might be correct and they may not be super kind of proliferated and elaborate. Still, abstract doesn't mean complicated. Abstract means divorced from concreteness, divorced from what's actually present. That's what abstract is. So you can any idea that you might have about it, it will still lead you astray. So what you should do first is, well, what should you do first?
So in theory, as long as hindrances are there, so I'm within domain of hindrances, underneath, so to speak, it's like this body is covered by this mess of suffering, and when hindrances are below, then the body is seen as it is.
Hindrances are below, in what sense?
It's like before, and it's like I see them from the perspective of...
I see what you mean. Rather, so, well, depends on how you phrase it. You could also say the body is seen below the hindrances, like more fundamental, basically.
Yes.
And then the hindrances are basically happening on top of that. But see, that would already be kind of the result of when you have properly recognized it. So what do you have to do in order to reach that point where you see the body is more fundamental than the hindrances and therefore overcome them?
Really practice the entire gradual training to the moment of abandoning domain of hindrances.
Yep, 100%. But more specifically, what would you do? Let's say you have fulfilled the prerequisites. You've been keeping the 8 precepts for months or years. Your sense restraints. You never allow your senses to spill out into sensual preoccupations, and you don't delight in company. You spend most of your time in seclusion, and you don't tolerate unwholesome states, even for a moment. So, what would be the thing you need to do to kind of if there's nothing that you can attend to, no idea that will directly lead you to it, what is the first step that you would do in order to eventually recognize it?
Absence of pressure.
How can you arrive at
It's felt.
Yeah, but how would you let's say deactivator or de-emphasize the pressure so that the body can be revealed? So because that is what is covering it up. So
by maintaining the right order.
Well, but the right order is going to come when you see the body. So if at first you're not seeing it. So
It's more like seeing this one point when all hindrances come through, which is pressure by anything, and at the moment of seeing this gateway, so to speak, it's like entire pressure is gone.
yeah, that's going to be the result. Like if you do it properly, you're going to reach that point. But in order to reach that point, like if you try to jump there directly, might sometimes work. It might not work sometimes. So why would it be that sometimes you're thinking about like, okay, yeah, the gateway, the point through the hindrances come through, and yet it doesn't really work. It doesn't bring you to the physicality. Or it's something that instead of like, let me do this, let me rehearse this idea or think about it like this, what is something that you need to not do?
Not giving in to the pressure to see the body.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if you have the pressure, if you recognize that you have this pressure to, okay, I need to find this or any other sort of pressure, you need to tame that first, and then you will be able to like not even find it. You will see, oh, it was already there. I was just overlooking it because of this pressure. So that's the key. Rather than trying to find the body so that the pressure will go away, practically speaking, more often than not, it will be the other way around. Especially if you don't have the right view yet, it will be undo the pressure first by restraining your acting out of it, and that will then eventually reveal the body. So if you just a basic question like why am I doing this? Why do I want to find the physicality? And if you arrive at the answer that there's just this ambiguous restlessness, pressure, craving there, then you need to kind of rein in your mind, hold it back from that, and then once that calms down, you would be able to recognize what's already there. Because again, it's like that simile that the Buddha gave when the pond has been stirred up and all the mud in the pond is moving around, you can't see what's underneath. And so the way to still it is not to concentrate on some object that's ironically going to be secondary to the physicality. It's to stop giving in to these unwholesome activities that may seem totally justified. Because see, I'm trying to practice and all that stuff. But again, wholesome and unwholesome is determined by the intention behind it. So if it's an intention of restlessness and craving, then that will obstruct your clear seeing, whether you like it or not. So, but again, like if you haven't abandoned the even coarser unwholesome activities, where like you're still on account of these pressuring thoughts acting out by body and speech towards sensuality and aversion, then there's no hope that you can undo the pressures on this mental level. But if all that other stuff has been taken care of beforehand, then you're just left with this, and then it's a matter of applying the same principle that you did really with your virtue. You didn't try to like prevent the options to break the precepts from existing. You don't like go out into the world and destroy all the alcohol there is in order to keep the precept of not drinking and all and so on. You just, while the option to do it is there, you don't give in to it. And it's the same when you have these mental pressures. You will have the craving to do something, whatever it might be, and in this case to find the physicality. It's coming through that sense of restlessness, and then you don't try to just remove it, because that's going to be another restlessness. Instead you just see, okay, well, I'll endure this infinitely, because in and of itself it has arisen on its own, so if I imply that I need to get rid of it, that's going to be taking ownership of it, and that's, again, going to obscure whatever you may need to see. So, in a way, you could say, when you no longer care as much about finding the physicality, that's when you'll be able to do it. But you certainly need to keep trying to discern it. It's not like you just throw your hands up in the air and wait for it to arise. There has to be the effort, but you realize 99% of the effort is indirect. It's the effort of undoing what obstructs the recognition, and not just to kind of fabricate the recognition.
So would that be correct to say it's good to practice including these thoughts of pressuring thoughts of finding the physicality into the pressure?
Yeah. And because, see, any thought, that's actually the crucial thing, because like, again, if you've been keeping virtue, if you have thoughts about covetousness and greed and fantasizing about things you want, and hating and being annoyed at certain people or whatever, you will recognize those thoughts quite easily, and you will be able to restrain them. But when it comes to these other things that are slightly more subtle and might even feel justified, like I said before, it's most of the time you get dragged by it because it just feels just so personal. It's kind of like you just almost automatically take it for granted. So yeah, very much it has to be included, because at the end of the day, a pressure is a pressure. So you don't want to be justifying or kind of acting as if some pressures are fine. If you want to overcome the hindrances, which are what obstructs the recognition of the physicality, then you need to be careful with any direction that involves pressure, because that's what the hindrances are. It's any type of pressure. So it's often this tendency for people to justify, like, no, I know that I'm acting out of hindrances, but I just hope that if this is kind of like the right acting out, so if I just keep going there, eventually, like, somehow I'll arrive at this thing that I'm looking for. But that's not a very realistic hope, and you basically just wind yourself up and take yourself farther away from it, and then you'll just be kind of, at some point you'll give up on it, and then maybe you'll have the chance to find it. But see, you can prevent that entire thing, you can prevent that entire wasted effort by just from the very beginning realize, okay, this is a pressure, I shouldn't be acting out of it. So, and because again, it's not only about the physicality. If you see pressure as pressure, you're also developing Yonisamanasikara. So,
it would be the way towards recognizing all the five holding aggregates, basically.
Yeah, so if right now you're being pressured to recognize the body, well, contemplate what feeling is there. Why? If is it an unpleasant feeling that's there on account of me not seeing the body? And if you take it through that angle, that's already mindfulness. It may not be the mindfulness you wanted, but that doesn't matter. The point is to...
Most of the time that's the better mindfulness.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the one you need, not the one you want.
Yeah.
So again, being mindful of your intention. Why am I trying to do this? And that is the proper mindfulness, the proper Yonisamanasikara then and there. And if you stick to it, then maybe you will get to see the body on the same peripheral level. But you have to be careful that the attempt is again not rooted in the same pressure like we said before.